All right, folks, thank you for showing up here to, I think, our third in-person event in the last few months. As most of you know, we were hybrid during the pandemic, but trying out new venues, trying to figure out what works, what gets the most attendees. This looks like a pretty good event so far, so thank you all for coming out. Today's topic, generative AI on AWS. Just real quick, want to thank our sponsors, or try to. So thank you to our sponsors who were able to make this event happen. As you guys all know, this is going to get recorded. It's going to be up on YouTube. We do have this on Zoom right now for virtual folks attending. But thank you all for showing up. Today we have Vikas Shah from AWS, and I'm going to just stop talking and let you take away the show, all right?
All right.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you everyone for coming in, and I don't have the clicker, but I will try to do it like this. Okay. Is everyone able to hear me fine? Okay. All right, cool. All right, who here has not used ChatGPT or any large language model yet? All right, everyone has. Who is here for just drinks? All right, awesome. So this is going to be a pretty short session, about 30 to 35 minutes. So feel free to ask any questions. We have 2 hours allocated for this. And the way I've structured it is in the first section, I'm going to give you an overview of generative AI. Some of the terms you might already be familiar with, but I'm just going to touch on it so that it's clear. And I'll be using those terms throughout the presentation. And then in the second section, I'm going to be talking about the tools that are available in AWS to support building generative AI applications. I started with AWS 4 years ago, and that was the time I was first introduced to AI/ML as well, where I used to talk about that how AI/ML is at it's becoming mainstream and so on. But what we're seeing in last 6 to 8 months is it's not in a mainstream, it is at an inflection point. And some of the reasons for this inflection is there is infinite amount of compute capacity available, there's infinite amount of data available, and there are a lot of model sophistication architecture available. One of them, for example, is transformer-based architecture. So if you've read this paper called Attention is All You Need, what this architecture does is it focuses on parallelism, and instead of sequencing the word to predict the next word, it looks at all the words in parallel and figures out the next word. And that's where these are the images that are generated from generative AI. So let's quickly touch on what is generative AI. Generative AI, if you don't know, is if you already use ChatGPT and other large language models, so very similar concept. It's a tool that can generate new content and ideas. So pictures here you're seeing are all generated from one of the model called Stable Diffusion. So the ideas could be images, ideas could be text, ideas could be music, and so on. And all of these generative AI models are powered by very, very large model. And we're talking about the parameters in billions. So you can basically think about these models being trained on the entire internet for some of the large language models. And the way they are different than now I'm calling the traditional machine learning model, which was like 8 months ago. The way they're different is the traditional models were really good in doing certain tasks or one set of tasks. So in the past, what we used to do is we would train a model to do a task like sentiment analysis or just extract text or process a text. But with these large models now, we're able to do more than one task. And they are trained on massive amounts of data. So these models are also called foundation model, which is the term we'll be using throughout the presentation as well. Some of the common use cases we're seeing across the industry are these. So it could be text generation, so writing an article, writing a blog, writing a poem, for example. It could be around a virtual assistant where these models are asking certain questions, user is inputting the answers, and it is taking certain actions from that. It could be summarization of the document, searching on the document. It could be around code generation, image generation, music generation, video generation, and so on. A lot of use cases I've been hearing from industry is more on the what you see on the top line and some code generation. Image are specific to certain industry, music not so much, but still specific to certain industries. And what we're seeing is when you're building the model, you would, or when you're thinking about generative AI, you'll most likely fit into one of these three categories. So the first category is you could, which is where we see fewer customers, is you could be a model builder, which is you're building from the ground up a large language model, you're training the model, you're deploying the model, and so on. Again, this is where you need there is a lot of complexity, you need a lot of resources, you need a lot, like an average, on an average, you're talking about like millions of dollars, a couple of millions to train these models. The second set of model users are the one where you are using a public source model, or you are fine-tuning the model, which is where we see a lot of our customers. And then, again, here there is some work that needs to be done, but we see still a lot of customer who wants to who have affinity towards open source are fallen under this category, or who wants to fine-tune the models a lot falls under this category. The third one is where their customers where they're able to use APIs to call these models. And this is an area where most of our customers, like 80% of customers, fit in, where they can pass the text, for example, call the API, get the response, and use it to further process it or give it back to the user. Any questions so far? Okay. If you have seen any AWS AI/ML presentation, you might be familiar with this deck, but within AWS, when we talk about machine learning, there are 3 layers. And again, generative AI also fits into these 3 layers. So the bottom one is where you have ML framework and infrastructure. So if you are building the model from ground up, this is where it will provide you all the infrastructure and capabilities. Like if you're building the model, you might need GPUs. That's where you get those GPUs. You might need frameworks and so on. Then the middle layer is the Sagemaker layer, where it provides further tools and capabilities when you're building or fine-tuning the models. So this is where you might need, you will have capabilities out of the box, like monitoring capability, experimentation capability, tracking those experimentation, and so on. And then the third one is the AI services layer. So these are the pre-trained models that you can call just using APIs. So all you do is pass in the data. These models are already pre-trained, and you get the response. An example could be image recognition. You pass in an image, it is getting you're getting the response from that. In terms of generative AI, where that falls in is on the ML infrastructure layer. We'll talk about some of the newer silicon chips that we have announced. In the middle Sagemaker layer, we'll talk about how you can, for example, use an open source model, put it on Sagemaker, fine-tune it, or deploy it. And then the top one, the AI services layer, this is where we'll talk about 2 services. One is called Amazon Bedrock, and the other one is called CodeWhisperer. So let's dive into this. Couple of things I want to call out is so generative AI has been around for really, I think, for a couple of years now, but where it really got attention is when the ChatGPT was launched. But since then, we've been asking a lot of customers on what are some of the gaps you see in the industry, and it is broadly classified into these 5 categories. By the way, every single customer is really excited about it. Every single customer is thinking about how they can use generative AI within their business context or within their job function. But on a high level, these are 5 layers of things that they've asked us. The first is around the flexibility. So many of our customers are looking for a way to use different sets of model for different use cases. So a use case could be that I want to generate an image from a text, or a use case would be I want to translate a text. And they just don't want to use one model. They want to use the best of the best models. The second one is around the security, and this is, again, really important for majority of our customers. And security is in 2 parts. One is I don't want the model provider to have access to any of the data that I use. And the second is I want all the security feature like encryption. I want to keep the data within the network. I don't want it to go to internet and so on. The third is around the cost-efficient infrastructure. And this is important both for customers who are building the models from the scratch, where they're looking for better price performance, or when we are building these services, we're hosting on these infrastructure. The fourth and fifth are kind of very similar, which is you have this model, but in order to actually use this model into your application, you might need other components. So let's say you're fine-tuning the model. You might need a data storage. So you can store the data, you can fine-tune the model. When you're fine-tuning the model, there might be some experimentation you would do, and you would need capabilities to track those experiments and so on. So it's not just the models that customers need, it's the fully blown solution so that they can get business value out of it. So the other 2 are more along those lines. And that's why we announced these 3 new launches last month. So I'm going to go over these, but I'll also go over other capabilities like Sagemaker, Jumpstart, and so on. So let's dive into these. The first one is the Bedrock, and Bedrock is where you can call the API and get the response. We will be supporting many different models, and I'll talk about those. And again, this service is currently under preview, so we will be launching it soon. The second one are the silicon chips. So these are, if you're building the models from ground up, when you're building the machine learning model, the process would involve you would have the data, you would train the model, and then you would deploy the model. So for training, to get the better price performance, we launched the Trainium, and when you're ready to deploy the model, we launched the Inferentia. And then finally, the CodeWhisperer, which is your code companion tool, which allows you to efficiently code. It will suggest the code, recommend the code, so you get all those capabilities. So let's dive into all these capabilities, starting with Bedrock. So again, if you're familiar with the concept of serverless, which is you don't have to manage any infrastructure, this is very similar concept. Don't have to worry about provisioning the endpoint, managing the infrastructure. We take care of all of that for you. The second thing, which is really important for a lot of customers, is the flexibility. So we have partnered with the third-party model providers, some of the best startups, and we'll be building the Amazon models as well. So as a customer, you will have choice to pick the models that you like, and also the models that are very appropriate for your use case. And then third and fourth are around the security. So with Bedrock, your data will remain your IP. These model providers or us, we won't have any access to your data. It will also remain within your VPC. There will be private link support, so the data remains within the backbone of AWS network, and it doesn't go over internet. And then we'll be launching integration with tools like S3, Sagemaker, and so on, so you can build the end-to-end applications. So the models that are supported by Bedrock, there'll be two categories. The first party model, which is from the Amazon. In that, there'll be two categories. One is called Titan model. And in Titan, again, there'll be two set of models, the Titan text and Titan embedding. And then from the third party, there will be three models during the launch. One is from the AI21 called Jurassic 2. The other one is from the Anthropic called Claude. And the third one is Stable Diffusion. So let's dive into these models a little bit more. Titan family, there'll be two models, Titan text and Titan embedding. Titan text is a model which is used for your text processing tasks. So think about summarization, think about Q&A. All of those tasks could be achieved with Titan. And we'll be launching different size of Titan, so you can pick from small, medium, large, for example. And with the Titan embedding, this is a model that can be used to convert from text to from word to text, so that you can then use it for things like personalization and so on. One thing that we kept in mind when we were building it from ground up was the responsible AI and the concept of that. So when we've trained this model, we're already filtering out inappropriate content, and then we'll also be providing you the capability to further filter out some of the user queries that are inappropriate. On the third-party model side, the Jurassic 2 is really good if you have tasks that are more on the language translation. There are some European languages listed here. You can translate from one language to another. Of course, you can do the text processing as well. Same with the Claude. It can do text processing tasks like Q&A, summarization, and so on. And then the model from Stability AI called Stable Diffusion is good if you want to convert from text to image. Other use cases could be you want to further enrich an image, and Stable Diffusion will be able to do that as well. And then one more feature that will be available is fine-tuning. So a lot of customers want to use these models, but want to train it on their own data. So with these models, what you will be able to do is fine-tune these models, and you can start with really like 10 or 100 of documents, let's say, and train these models. So then you can get the custom answers from this. Any questions on Bedrock?
Since it's a preview, can anyone get access to preview? Or
Yeah. So we have if you have an account team, you can work with them. But yes, we have customers. We're giving preview. So first preview date is done, and we're giving more previews in July. So
when you're fine-tuning this model, can you limit it to only talking about your own organization's data? So like I have a chat bot. I only wanted to answer questions about my product, not about my competitors, which you might also know about.
Yeah. So that is a very good question, and I think there are other mechanisms to do that. So there is a mechanism called RAG, retrieval augmented, forgot the generation. But what that is you are training these models on just your data, and when you're presenting the data back, you are also giving the links to the source. So you're just customizing based on your data. When you are fine-tuning, I think there will still be some other information, like because it's a generalized model, then it is optimized on your own data, so it still understands, like if you want to if a question is not within your domain and it's outside of domain, then it goes as a default to the generalized model and get the response back. I don't know if you can limit it during the launch, but maybe that will come in future.
How do you vet third-party models for their security? And is there some sort of compliance thing to there too?
Yeah. So there is an extensive vetting process, and what we are doing is on the back end, we are providing them AWS managed accounts so that they can deploy the model. As a customer, you don't have access to their weights, but as the model providers, they don't have access to your data. In terms of figuring out which models are the best one, right now, during the launch, we've just partnered with some of the really popular startups.
Okay. And in terms of models, would you say that Claude from Anthropic is the equivalent of ChatGPT?
Yeah, it can do a lot of same task. The one of the thing that Claude does, which the ChatGPT and other model doesn't do, is their over focus on responsible AI. So a lot of what they do is around responsible AI as well. But yeah, very similar task.
So is that what AWS chooses to endorse for the competitor of ChatGPT?
I think so like the playbook or the playground that. Okay, all right. All right. Yeah. So it depends on the use case. So we won't have an instance like you have on ChatGPT, which is a playground, or where you can just go in and type in question and do Q&A. The way we are building it is more for customers to use these APIs so that they can interact with it. Yeah.
Trying to make sure I'm following your presentation thoroughly. In the beginning, you presented 3 categories of things. And right now, you're diving into the first category, fundamental models?
Yeah.
These are fundamental models, the things you've just presented.
Yeah. So these are the models that will cover most of the use cases. That cohort 3, if I call it, which is where you can call APIs and get.
Okay, so you're down in the third box where there are APIs.
On the AI/ML, the top block, which is the AI services block, where
Back further, you have the fundamental models building.
Yep. Let me go back here. Here, let's go here.
Just in the background, folks, just a heads up, we are trying to get the mic working, just so bear with us a little bit here.
Are you talking about this layer? Okay, further, okay. Yep, so this is what I'm talking about. Okay. All right.
There's 3 categories.
Oh, so those are here or this one.
Okay. You described fundamental models as things people would very rarely do. They have to build it from scratch. There's a lot of work.
Yep, this one.
So this is a little.
Yeah, so the Bedrock falls under cohort 3, which is most of the users will be doing. Cohort 1 is if you think about Anthropic, if you think about AI21, the models they build, they'll fall under cohort 1.
Thank you.
All right, so what are other ways you can use the models that are out there? So one of the service that can be used to tune, train, deploy these generative AI models is called Amazon Sagemaker, and this is a service that is built to build, train, tune, deploy the models at scale. And on the generative AI side, let's say you want to train the model from ground up. Some of the features that Sagemaker provides includes, so it provides you capability to pick the instances that you would need to. So let's say you need GPU instance. It will provide you the choices of the GPU instance. If you, let's say, go about buying your own GPU instance, they'll get outdated pretty soon, like in a year. That's the cycle. So what this also provides is not only access to the GPU, but the most latest and greatest ones. And then I won't go into details of all these features, but on the training side, we spoke about the experiment tracking, debugging, the orchestration. So if you're training in parallel, how do you orchestrate between the nodes? Sagemaker provides those capabilities out of the box. And then the top one is, let's say you're using some of these frameworks. Sagemaker also provides you containers that have all these library installed, so that takes away some of that heavy lifting for you. In terms of foundation model, let's say you want to use an open source model or other third-party models. We also have something called Sagemaker Jumpstart, where you can use these models. So some of the models are available here. Let's say you want to use a pretty popular one as a Hugging Face hub, which includes a lot of open source large language model. If you want to use some of those models, you can do that on the Sagemaker Jumpstart, where either you can go to the Hugging Face hub, it will have the code on how to deploy that model, or you can go down to the Sagemaker Jumpstart, search for that model, and find the model and deploy it. We also have proprietary models on the Sagemaker Jumpstart. So here I have 3 startups that have proprietary models. So what we are doing on the back end is providing you that security capability. So we're, again, provisioning the AWS managed account, provisioning these models for you, so you can use these models securely. The one thing that is different from Bedrock and Sagemaker Jumpstart is when you're using Sagemaker Jumpstart, you're provisioning an endpoint, but with the Bedrock, you're calling the API and getting the response. So that's the only difference. And if, let's say, your use case is that I'm going to be using this model continuously, I have affinity to open source, then maybe Sagemaker Jumpstart is a better fit for you. Another thing you can also do is some of the open source models can be fine-tuned on your own data. So you can also do that using Sagemaker Jumpstart. So we spoke about the Bedrock, where you can call the API. We spoke about the Sagemaker Jumpstart, where you can use the open source model and some of the proprietary models. Let's talk about some of the infrastructure capability. So let's say you're building the model from ground up. Here are some of the instances we recently launched. So if you are training the model, we launched Trainium. If you are, all right. Hello. Is everyone up? All right. Yeah, so actually, do we even need this? Okay. Better? Okay. Cool. Yeah, so the Trainium is when you're training the model. What we have done on the back end is we have built the silicon chips from ground up and optimized it for training tasks. We've also included things like the fast networking and EC2 Ultra cluster and so on. So when you're training these models from ground up, this provides better price performance as compared to other GPUs that we have available. And same with the Inferentia, which provides you better price performance when you're deploying the model. An example would be a blog that I was reading from Hugging Face, which is they tried different models that they have. These are open source models like BERT and so on Inferentia. What they found is compared to the previous version of Inferentia or compared to the GPUs, these chips provide 4 times lower latency and 10 times better throughput. So that's the gains that you'll get. And another tool, if you just want to use generative AI and a tool, then we have CodeWhisperer, which is your code companion. And what it does is you write a comment, it will recommend the code for you. It will also understand the context of the code and recommend other snippets. It will also give you unit tests for examples and so on. Some of the other features, so we spoke about the code suggestion. Some of the other features are around the security. So it will give you it will scan the code and give you the security vulnerabilities. It will also figure out if your code resembles to one of the code that is available open source. So what you can do from that is you can figure out the licensing agreement there and see if you're violating any licensing agreement. So again, speaking about that the concept of responsible AI, this can help you in achieving that. Any questions on Code Companion or CodeWhisperer? One of the tests we did during the preview was we gave the developer, there were two set of developers, we gave the same task, and what we found is the folks who use CodeWhisperer were much more productive and more likely to complete the task as compared to the one who didn't use. I use it as well, and it's I don't see going back to not using these AI companion tools at all.
So where do these plug into your system? Is this a plugin to my IDE? Or
Yeah, it is a plugin in your IDE. So let's say you are using VS Code. There's a plugin there where you can enable the CodeWhisperer. There are two versions of CodeWhisperer. One is which is free version, and another is professional version. So the free version is readily available. There are some less security features, but for the most part that should work. But if you're enterprise, the professional might be better because it provides more security capability.
Awesome.
Cool. Any other questions?
What's the pricing for the?
Oh, the professional one is $20 per user right now, per month.
Does CodeWhisperer create unit tests for you?
Yeah, it will create unit tests for you as well. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? That's all I have in terms of slides. I will welcome all the questions or any suggestion or anything else you would like to hear, but that's all I have on the content side.